And just let me know if anyone has any conflicts or not. Ms. Hunter, any conflicts? Mr. Klein?
No.
Ms. Martinez? Okay, great. No conflicts.
Thank you, Judge. We will wait to make sure all of our other courtrooms also have no conflicts while we are waiting. Jasmine, are you guys okay on your audio, everything, technical difficulties?
So one of our laptops that we're using is not currently, it's not able to enter the meeting. But give us like 2 minutes and we will be.
Not a problem. We still have plenty of courtrooms to clear conflicts on.
There's 2 of them, so you should leave one.
Your Honor, we have resolved our technical issues.
Sounds like we have a little bit of echo. You might need to mute one of your two devices.
I believe we should be good now.
Want to do another test?
Yeah, is there an echo anymore?
There is not. You sound wonderful.
Woo, thank you.
You're very welcome. We are still checking conflicts in other rooms. Please hold. Judge, we have been cleared. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go through my pre-trial checklist, and let me begin, first of all, if we could have one person from each team. Team Kevin, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Team Dwight, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. We all have copies of your rosters. And do all the participants have their trial notebooks?
Yes, Your Honor.
Team Dwight?
Yes, Your Honor.
And actually, this next question I'm going to ask of Ms. Ham, our courtroom monitor. In the checklist, there's a notation that if video recorders are present, that each team has consented to that. Do we have any video recorders present here other than the YouTube feed?
None other than the YouTube feed.
The Colorado Bar Association is recording this and broadcasting it, live streaming it on YouTube. There potentially could be photographs taken by the Colorado Bar Association as well. Does each team understand that and consent to that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Team
Yes,
White?
Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone in the courtroom other than myself, the presiding judge, our scoring panelists, our courtroom monitor, and team members? Anyone else present? Hearing none, I'll assume that there are no others present. Please remember, teams, that there will be no recesses allowed except for a health emergency. The time limits on each portion of the trial will be strictly enforced. And do we have timekeepers present for each team?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to swear in each of the team members. Let's start with that. If each team member would please raise your right hand for both teams. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conforms to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. I see everyone indicating affirmatively. Witnesses, please raise your right hands. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial? Thank you. I see everyone nodding affirmatively. Scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? See everyone nodding affirmatively. Thank you very much. I believe we're ready to proceed. Team Kevin, you're the prosecution in this case. And who will, I'm sorry, first of all, before we begin, would each team mind just introducing the team members? Let's start with Team Kevin, the prosecution.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Abbott Howe, and I represent the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Feliciana Sayers, and I represent the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Warren Newman, and I represent the plaintiff, Mr. Dakota Weirs.
May our witnesses now introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good
You can
afternoon,
go ahead.
council, members of the jury. My name is Macklin Gifford, and I am Casey Rogers.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, council, members of the jury. My name is Taylor Stipra, and I am Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, council, and members of the jury. My name is Jordan Merriweather, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a timekeeper for Team Kevin? If you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, Your Honor, council, members of the jury. My name is Ashlyn Barrick, and today I'm the timekeeper for Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much. Team Dwight.
Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, my name is Jasmine Machievich, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Devin Williams, the cross-examination of Carson Durst, and the defense's closing statement. At this time, I would like to ask your permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Evelyn Clark, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Blake Doncourt, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, and giving the opening remarks for the defense.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Andrew Senior, and I'll be delivering the direct examination of Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Casey Rogers.
Thank you very much. Would you like to introduce your witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Jackson Pagano, and I am Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Jasmine Perez, and I will be portraying Skylar Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I am Tanner Bertram, and I will be playing Dr. Devin Williams.
Thank you. Do we have a timekeeper for Team Dwight? And please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I'm Cesar Aguirre. I will be the timekeeper for Dwight.
All right, thank you very much. I believe we have all the introductions. I believe we're ready to proceed. Team Dwight, you're the prosecution. I believe it's Ms. Sayers that's going to do the opening statement. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, before we proceed, the plaintiff has a couple preliminary matters.
Okay.
For our first preliminary matter, the plaintiff requests that the stipulated facts be constructively read into the record.
When you say constructively,
That they are read into the record, but in order to save the court's time, they are not actually read into the record right now.
okay. I'll accept the stipulated facts as being a part of the court record.
For our second preliminary matter, Your Honor, the plaintiff requests that prior to closing arguments, the jury instructions are also constructively read into the record.
Agreed.
And finally, Your Honor, for our third preliminary matter, the request that while entering exhibits, the attorney and the witness both refer to the exhibit on their own, and then once it has been published and admitted, it may be screen shared.
Does Team Dwight have any comment on that?
No, Your Honor, we would just request the same goes for the defense.
Okay, that also is accepted. Thank
With
you
that,
very
Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay, Team Dwight, any pretrial matters?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So we're ready to proceed. Let's begin with opening statements. Team Kevin, I believe the opening statement will be by Ms. Sayers, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please. Oh, and we have 5 minutes for opening statements. Timekeepers ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Sayers, please proceed.
DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup. Young Dakota Weirs was sitting on the couch watching TV when he heard his grandfather begin to play his favorite song. He jumped up to join his grandpa on the piano bench where they sat for hours on end, playing the same song over and over until young Dakota got it right, until he no longer tripped over the tricky chords. That song became their song. He played that song at his first competition. He played that song at his grandfather's funeral, and he played that song as a part of his audition to Juilliard. A few months later, he received a full ride scholarship to the school of his and his grandfather's dreams. But members of the jury, some dreams are too good to come true. Instead of spending his early adulthood at Juilliard, Dakota Weirs was going to doctor's office after doctor's office, trying to figure out what was causing his pain and weight loss. He finally found out it was non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He became too weak to play the simplest song. His cancer not only shattered any hope of a future in music, it robbed him of his closest connection with his grandfather. DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup. What do these all have in common? All were proven carcinogenic, and all were put on the market by companies that did not care if they did or did not cause cancer. Members of the jury, yet again, we have a company trying to hide the dangers of its product. Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Feliciana Sayers, and together with Moira Newman and Abbott Howe, we represent Dakota Weirs, who had his dreams dashed because Lush failed to prevent the dangers of its product. The plaintiff carries the burden in today's case by preponderance of the evidence. A preponderance of the evidence is this: if there are two stacks of paper in front of you, and one stack has even one more page than the other, that side prevails. For Mr. Weirs to prevail, we must prove to you that Lush manufactured a product containing Drufo, that they failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent an unreasonable risk of harm, that Mr. Weirs was someone who should reasonably be expected to use the product, and that Mr. Weirs had damages caused by the defendant's negligence, while the product was being used in a manner the defendant should reasonably have expected. When we meet our burden, the defense has to prove their affirmative defense by preponderance of the evidence. They must prove that Dakota Weirs was more negligent than Lush, and his negligence caused his non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So what is Drufo? Drufo is a bonding agent unique to Lush fertilizer. It bonds the nitrogen to the other chemicals in order to reduce the release of excess nitrates into the soil and water. It is also a pesticide. Lush then marketed Drufo as making its product safer to use and more environmentally friendly. But members of the jury, let's be clear. No matter how much you dress up a pesticide, its purpose is to kill. Dakota Weirs used Lush fertilizer and developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma from his exposure to Drufo. Dr. Casey Rogers ran his own study on the effects of Drufo and cancer, and Carson Durst worked within Lush fertilizer and saw them acknowledge and suppress Drufo's ties to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Like Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, cares more about profits than safety. Skylar Weirs has misguided views on modern agritech, and Devin Williams will suspend his ethical duties in favor of environmental marketing gimmicks. During today's trial, ask yourself these three questions. 1, how safe is Drufo? Really? 2, do we expect a 14-year-old to be able to protect himself from dangerous chemicals? And 3, did Lush do enough to protect its customers from the potential dangers of its product? At the end of today's trial, Ms. Newman will walk with you through the evidence presented today. She will show you how we have met our burden, and she will ask you to hold Lush fertilizer accountable for their negligence. DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sayers. Team Dwight, who will be giving your opening statement? Is it Ms. Clark?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, timekeeper's ready.
May I proceed?
Please proceed, Ms. Clark.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear that Dakota Weirs played a game of Russian roulette. As you just heard from Ms. Sayers, Dakota was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma after being exposed to many chemicals over a long period of time, just one of which was Lush fertilizer. However, the plaintiff has not told you the full story. The plaintiff has not told you that you will hear from Dakota Weirs that while working as a landscaper, he used many different fertilizers, not just Lush fertilizer. You will learn that unlike Drufo, the chemical bonding agent in Lush fertilizer, many of those other fertilizers contained added pesticides, which have been proven to cause cancer in humans. You will see that there were clear warning labels on each package of fertilizer, including Lush fertilizer, and you will see that warning label. And you will hear that, unfortunately, Mr. Weirs chose to ignore safety precautions when using fertilizer products on a daily basis for 4 years. Throughout the course of this trial, you are going to hear the other half of the story through Lush Fertilizer's 3 witnesses. First is Mr. Blake Doncourt, the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer. He will tell you that Lush cares passionately about the environment and actually donates 10% of its profits to nonprofit organizations committed to decreasing the world's nitrogen footprint. You will hear that because Lush cares about the environment and its consumers, they extensively tested their products to ensure their safety. You will hear that these tests demonstrated that there is no valid scientific evidence showing that Drufo is carcinogenic to humans. Mr. Doncourt will testify that if he had been aware of any such evidence, he would never have put Drufo on the market. Finally, even though it was safe and it wasn't necessary, Mr. Doncourt will testify that they put safety warnings on their packaging and recommended that consumers wear protective safety gear while using fertilizer products just out of an abundance of caution. Secondly, you will hear from Skylar Weirs, an investigative journalist who has extensively researched the health concerns of Drufo. She is also Dakota Weirs' twin sister. Skylar Weirs has spent almost a year researching whether there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer, and you will hear that she found absolutely no conclusive evidence that Drufo is carcinogenic to humans. However, you will hear she found abundant research saying that tying other chemicals to cancer, chemicals that have not been placed in Lush fertilizer. You will hear that Skylar Weirs completed all of her research before Dakota Weirs ever developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma, so Skylar has no dog in this fight. Thirdly, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, the leader of Lush Fertilizer's Research and Development Labs and the chief of Lush's Ethics Committee. Dr. Williams will tell you that Drufo was designed to prevent the user and the environment from exposure to harmful chemicals, including nitrates and other pesticides that are used in fertilizers. He will tell you that Drufo is not only non-carcinogenic, but also safer than other fertilizers because it does not need to be used as often. Dr. Williams will testify under oath that Drufo has not been correlated with a statistically significant increase in non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other type of cancer. Dr. Williams will testify that all of this has been proven, and any studies claiming otherwise are based in unreliable data and unreliable testing. Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this trial, Judge Pratt will ask all of the members of the jury to read instructions, will instruct the members of the jury that the plaintiff has the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that Lush Fertilizer failed to use reasonable care in putting its products on the market, and that failure caused Mr. Weirs to develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma. We submit to you that the plaintiff will not meet their burden. Because the plaintiff has the burden of proof, he gets to present his case first. We ask that you keep an open mind and not come to any conclusions until you have heard from the defense. At the conclusion of this case, after you have heard and seen all of the evidence, my co-counsel Jasmine Michievich will ask you to find Lush Fertilizer not liable and instead find that Mr. Weirs is responsible for his own injuries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Team Kevin, who will be presenting your first witness?
Plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. So for direct examination, you have a total of 25 minutes, which includes any redirect if you choose to do any.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's presumed in the stipulated facts that witnesses have already been sworn, so I won't take the time to swear every witness. You're presumed to be sworn. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers. My name is Maura Newman. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Casey Rogers. Rogers is spelled Rogers.
Dr. Rogers, what do you do for a living?
I am a professor in horticulture and entomology at UC Berkeley, as well as being an independent toxicology researcher.
How long have you been working in this field?
At this point, almost 20 years.
Please tell the jury about the education you have.
I have a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Chemistry from Colorado State University, as well as a PhD in Agriculture and Entomology from the University of California at Berkeley.
Have you published any articles?
Over the years, I've published 6 total.
What are the most relevant ones?
Well, the most relevant ones to this case would be my most recent 4. They would be in 2013, Evolutionary Sciences. I published an article called Drufo, Toxicity and Carcinogenicity, a review of the scientific basis of the European Union assessment. In 2019, I published an article in Weed Biology called Survey Reveals Frequency of Human Exposure to Drufo. And again, in 2019, I also published an article in The Environmentalist called The Evidence of Human Exposure to Drufo, a Review. And again, in 2017, I published an article called Drufo-Resistant Weeds.
What are you working on now?
Currently, I am working on a study to test the efficacy of certain protective equipment on the exposure to certain non-target species when they are in contact with Drufo.
At this time, the plaintiff requests the court recognize Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in toxicology research and horticulture, as his skill, knowledge, education, experience, and training have been shown.
You're muted, Your Honor, but the defense objection would request a brief voir dire.
You're still muted, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may have a brief voir dire, 30 seconds.
Good evening, Dr. Rogers. I'm here to ask about some of your qualifications. First of all, you are not a medical doctor, correct?
There's no need for me to be a medical doctor. I've been working in a medical field for 20 years. That outlasts any medical degree you could possibly find.
But you are not a licensed medical doctor, correct?
Like I said, there's no need to be.
And so you've also never gone to medical school?
That's how you become a medical doctor, counsel.
So no, you have not been to medical school.
Like I said, there's no need.
Your Honor, seeing that the witness has not attended medical school and therefore does not have a medical degree, we object to him rendering any opinions on medical causation and diagnoses, seeing as he does not have the proper education.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Dr. Rogers has been working in the toxicology field for over 20 years. He has written many articles about this field, and he has worked extensively in his field of study. Therefore, he would be familiar with the types of diagnoses that his patients would come into contact with after being exposed to the dangerous chemical.
And Ms. Newman, in what fields are you offering him as an expert? Ms. Newman, I believe you froze up. In what areas are you offering him as an expert?
In the areas of horticulture and toxicology research. And under toxicology research, he would be able to give opinions of medical diagnoses because he would be intimately familiar with the diagnoses his patients would come into contact with after being exposed to the chemicals he's been studying.
All right, the objection is overruled. He will be accepted as an expert in horticulture and toxicology. Any issues with regard to his ability to diagnose or offer an opinion about cause of injury goes to the weight of his testimony, not its admissibility. So you may proceed. He is accepted as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Dr. Rogers, did you develop an expert opinion in this case?
Absolutely.
What were the steps you took to reach this opinion?
Well, I conducted a study to test if people who were exposed to Drufo over a long period of time developed any adverse health effects or negative effects.
You mentioned Drufo. Tell the jury what that is.
Drufo is a patented bonding agent that Lush uses in all of its products distributed throughout the United States. Its original intention is sold to be as being simply just a fertilizer. However, it also is a pesticide, meaning that it is intent to kill pests that are near it.
Considering this information, why did you conduct a study looking into the adverse effects?
Well, briefly after Drufo was released on the market, I had already begun hearing rumors of possible negative effects of exposure to Drufo, and I decided that I should conduct my own study in order to test if there was actually any truth behind those rumors.
How did you go about conducting your study?
I used, in the first part of my study, because it was technically two pieces, the first one had 3 separate test groups. One was a group with prolonged exposure, and they worked with the product essentially almost every day. Another one was a group with occasional exposure who worked on an exposure basis of every few days. And then the third was a control group that had no exposure to Drufo whatsoever.
Why did you choose these groups specifically?
Well, if I was using groups that did not already have exposure to Drufo in their lives, being that this is a survey study, I would be exposing more people to a potentially carcinogenic substance, and that would be, quite frankly, inhumane.
Did you believe the results these groups produced to be reliable?
Absolutely.
Why?
I conducted them with reliable methods that are common practice in my field. They always produce reliable results.
What were those results?
They were actually quite shocking. I found that people with prolonged exposure to Drufo were 10 times more likely to develop cancer as compared to the control group, and people with a more occasional exposure level were 5 times more likely to develop cancer as compared to the control group.
Did your study test for anything else?
Yes, the second part of my study was focused more at finding a way to mitigate exposure and to prevent people developing adverse health effects because they were exposed to Drufo. That study was technically 2 parts as well. One focused more on how Drufo is metabolized, and the other was finding ways to help prevent the effects of exposure.
What were the results of the first part of that second study?
The results of the first part were that Drufo can be metabolized in multiple ways, specifically through inhalation through the respiratory system, and the other one is through absorption through the skin.
And what were the results for that second part of the second study?
Well, that part of the study is still ongoing and has not produced any results. However, I did make a few recommendations in order to at least advise people that they should try and protect themselves from carcinogens.
You mentioned carcinogens. Were there any particular cancers that were more frequent than others?
Yes, the most common that I found in my study was non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which is the same type of cancer that Dakota Weers has.
Why non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is caused by exposure to certain environmental conditions, and it is not genetic. Therefore, it could be caused by conditions such as exposure to pesticides over long periods of time.
Considering all of the data from your studies, was anything familiar when you reviewed for this case?
Yes, I reviewed Dakota Weir's medical and employment records prior to coming here today, and I saw in those records that Dakota Weir's had an incredibly similar exposure level to those in my study who had prolonged exposure to Drufo and were 10 times more likely to develop cancer as compared to people who were not exposed to Drufo.
A little earlier, I had asked if you formed any expert opinions for this case. Please tell the jury what that expert opinion is now.
Dakota Weir's case of non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by exposure to Drufo and to Drufo only.
Why are you so sure that it was the Drufo that caused the cancer in today's case?
The results of my study compounded with Dakota Weir's employment records where he was exposed to Drufo at a prolonged exposure level for 4 years are more than enough evidence for proving that Dakota Weir's has his cancer from exposure to Drufo.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-exam, Mr. Senior. And
May I proceed?
you have 20 minutes. You may proceed.
Dr. Rogers, you've talked a lot about your study on Drufo, but that study was never peer-reviewed, correct?
My study was published in a scientific journal. Every expert knows what that means.
Dr. Rogers, my question was not whether or not your study was published in a prestigious journal. It was whether or not it was peer-reviewed, which it was not, correct?
That's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Yes, I would. A brief yes or no would suffice.
It calls for more of an explanation. However, my study being peer-reviewed is part of it being sent into a scientific journal and getting published. So yes, it was.
You decided to do your own study on Drufo because you had, quote unquote, been hearing reports of the potentially negative effects of the substance. Is this correct?
Yes, that was essentially my initial motivation to conduct the study.
So is it true then, Dr. Rogers, that you already held the belief that Drufo was carcinogenic going into your study?
Absolutely not. My study was intended to find if there were any adverse health effects in people exposed to Drufo. The reason that I conducted the study was because people were saying that it was carcinogenic. I would be more than happy if it wasn't because people wouldn't be dying, but that's simply not the case.
Moving on, let's talk about how your study was conducted. Now, your study did not compare the instances of cancer in farmers and gardeners who used products containing Drufo to farmers and gardeners who did not, correct?
That's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Dr. Williams, this is in your statement, and yes, I would like you to answer.
The first part of your question was in my statement. However, the second part, which was more of a question than the first, was not in my statement because I did not list who was in my control group. So once again, it's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Please answer the question.
Yes, I did compare them because they have similar environmental factors in their day-to-day lives, and therefore they would produce reliable test results.
So would you agree that farmers and gardeners are exposed to a number of different products, such as pesticides and plant foods, that other people are not exposed to on a regular basis?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sorry, what's the objection?
Compound question.
Overruled.
Can you re-ask the question?
Yes. You would agree that farmers and gardeners are exposed to a number of different chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and plant foods and such that normal people are not exposed to on a daily basis?
Well, I compared people who were exposed to Drufo that were farmers and gardeners to people who were not exposed to Drufo that were farmers and gardeners. So I would absolutely agree, and that's why they were in different groups in my study.
But your study didn't test whether farmers and gardeners in general have higher instances of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma than the general population, correct?
I wasn't testing for who has non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I was testing to see if Drufo killed people, and it does.
Dr. Rogers, it is true that a number of environmental factors can cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, correct?
Yes, one of which is exposure to Drufo.
And as far as you're aware, you're the only person who's come to the conclusion that Drufo is carcinogenic in humans, correct?
That's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
I would, yes.
I'm not the only person who has done that. People who've read my study and agreed with it, I have given the study to other people, and they have peer reviewed it and said that it was a valid study, as I said before. I have also told you that I have already heard rumors that people were believing Drufo was carcinogenic, and that's why I based my study, which found that they were correct.
Now, Dr. Rogers, this is your first time testifying as an expert witness in a trial such as this, correct?
Well, every expert has their first time, and this is mine. I'm very excited.
But you're hopeful that it will not be your last. Is that true?
Dakota Weirs isn't the only person to have developed cancer because they were exposed to Drufo. I would like to help other people that are in the same unfortunate situation.
Now, you are being paid for your testimony today, correct?
That's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Dr. Rogers, it is in your statement. If you could turn to line 1, I believe it says that.
Objection, Your Honor.
And the objection is what?
Improper impeachment.
I'm going to overrule that. Mr. Senior, if you can point out in the statement where it is, please do.
Dr. Rogers, on line 2 to 3, it says, "My name is Dr. Casey Rogers. I have been retained as an expert to testify on behalf of the plaintiff in this matter." Retained meaning that you are being paid for time taken away from your job to be here.
That's not at all what retained means, Mr. Senior. Retained means that my name and my qualifications were provided on a list to the defense prior to coming to this trial. It has nothing to do with financial compensation for me being here.
All right. Well, moving on. If the jury finds in favor of Mr. Weirs, you expect yourself to be at the forefront of several class action lawsuits.
Like I said before, I would like to help other people like Dakota Weirs who have developed cancer because they were exposed to Drufo. So absolutely.
And you will be retained again and again for each of these lawsuits in which you testify as an expert, correct?
That's not in my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Yes.
Well, I would hope that I am allowed to be part of the list of witnesses that's provided in those cases, because I would like to, as I've said multiple times before, to help people who have been exposed to Drufo and have the same unfortunate condition that Dakota Weirs is in today.
Now, moving on again, based off the results of your study, you recommend that anybody who works with Drufo should wear long pants and sleeves, correct?
Well, those were not technically based off of the results of the entire study as a whole. It was more based off of a lack of results in the second part of the study. I made recommendations simply because Drufo is a carcinogen, and I had already proven that. I was trying to tell people that they should, at least in any way they can, protect themselves until Drufo can get taken off the market.
And part of these protections was also that you recommended to wear an N95 mask or respirator, correct?
That's the same recommendation as the first one. It was to essentially prevent both modes of action and metabolisms that I found in my study.
Now, are you aware of the safety label that excuse me, Your Honor. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Newman, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Did being retained by the plaintiff in any way affect how you conducted your study?
Absolutely not. I conducted my study well in advance of this trial, and me being here changed absolutely nothing in how I conducted it because it was already completed before today.
And what does it mean that the second part of your study is ongoing?
Well, I didn't have enough time to fully test the efficacy of protective equipment on people that were exposed to Drufo. And so I was not able to produce results in that part of the study. And it's still ongoing because I am allowing more time to pass in the study so I can find accurate results.
Does the fact that you're still allowing for time for that part of your study, does that affect the results of any of the other parts of your study in any way?
Absolutely not. That part of the study was essentially a part 3. The first part was to find out whether or not Drufo was bad. It is. The second part of the study was to find out how Drufo is absorbed by the human body. I found out how it is absorbed by the human body. And the third part of the study was to find out how to save people's lives, and it's still ongoing. Hopefully those results will help save people in the future.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Senior, any recross? And recross would be limited to anything brought up in redirect.
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Team Kevin, if you would call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Carson Durst.
Carson Durst, you have already been sworn. Mr. Abbott, you may proceed. Or Mr. Howe, I'm sorry, Mr. Howe, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Durst?
I work at a company called Terrace Greenery, where I lead the research and development team.
Where did you work before you worked at Terrace Greenery?
I worked at another fertilizer company called Lush Fertilizer for 3 years, and it was my first job out of college.
So why do you no longer work at Lush Fertilizer then?
I just didn't enjoy my job at Lush, and I didn't believe that I was going to be able to succeed as a research and developer, and so I left, and I found this really amazing position at Terrace Greenery, and I've been there for the past 17 years.
Were there any complications that arose regarding your departure from Lush?
Yes, I signed a piece of paper when I first started working there. You know, I was so excited, fresh out of college, and I kind of forgot about it up until I left Lush. But that was settled in court, and I've been at my job and loving it for the past 17 years.
Turning back to your time at Lush Fertilizer, what kind of work did you do there?
I worked also on the R&D team researching Drufo.
We just heard Dr. Rogers testify as to what Drufo actually was. But why was Drufo so important?
Lush could make environmentally friendly products, and it was the key to their success as well as the company's success.
So specifically with this product, with Drufo, what did you do?
When I worked there in 2003, they were testing the safety of the product. So I researched nitrogen phosphorus carbonate, one of the chemical compounds that is comprised of Drufo.
What kind of research did you do into this compound?
You know, mainly literature research, and I found a rat study and that I found most interesting, and I decided to dig a little deeper into that.
So what's your understanding of how this particular study was conducted?
Well, populations of male and female rats were given different amounts of this chemical compound throughout their lifespan, and then once these rats died, their remains were analyzed.
And what were you able to learn from this study?
I learned that this chemical compound could cause cancer in rats, and exposure at a younger age could increase the chances of developing adverse health effects or cancer.
What did you do with the results of these studies, of this study, once you had found it?
I put them in my lab notebook, all the findings from this study and every other thing that I found, and I gave that to my boss, Jerry Langley.
So was this study the only extent of the research done into the safety of Drufo by Lush?
It was just one of the many we did.
What other research did Lush do?
Lush also did a study into the effects of Drufo on humans.
Mr. Please refer to Exhibit 4.
Okay, give me a second to pull it up. Okay, I'm ready.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This was the email that Jerry, my boss, sent me about that second study, the one we were just talking about.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of that email?
It sure is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff requests that Exhibit 4 be admitted into evidence as its accuracy and authenticity have been shown.
Any objection by the defense?
Objection, Your Honor. This exhibit is hearsay.
Mr. Howe, response?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay as pursuant to Rule 801D2. This is a statement from a party opponent, that opponent being Lush Fertilizer, specifically Jerry Langley, the employee of Lush's upper management who sent the email.
May I respond?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, opposing counsel has not laid sufficient foundation, no further objections, Your Honor.
Mr. Howe, you referred to which rule of evidence? 801 D2?
801D2, Your Honor.
Let me review that quickly. So you're offering this as a statement by an opposing party, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
I will permit it. The objection is overruled. I'm permitting it under Rule 801 D2.
Your Honor, may this exhibit be published?
Yes.
Ms. Durst, where is your name on that email recipient list?
My name starts with my first name on the first line of and the last word. And then if you follow through to the next line, my last name is right there.
Is Blake Doncourt's name also on that list?
His name is right next to mine. So after the word Durst, you see Blake Doncourt, so right there.
So was there anything in this email that stuck out to you as especially important?
Actually, now that you mention it, there were a couple things. First, I learned that Lush had done previous studies and found possible carcinogenic qualities in those studies and findings. Second was that their June 03 study, so the one that I was part of and where I found the rat study, that one was labeled inconclusive. And they also said they were going to do another study, and that was the September study on rats.
You may take down the exhibit. So in this next study, what were some of the findings that were presented?
When we finished that study, we met in a room to discuss what we learned. And two of the things that I learned was that there is a possible link to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and Drufo is considered a carcinogen or a possible carcinogen in humans.
So in the room where these findings were presented, were there any notable people?
There were, and it was kind of unusual because not many of our meetings, we had upper people there, but I do remember my boss was there and Alex Monroe was there as well.
Did Lush prepare an official report at the conclusion of this study?
Yes, they did, and I received a copy of it in January or February of 04.
Did this report contain any recommendations as to something that Lush could do to make their product safer?
There was a recommendation to bake Drufo to eliminate any possibility of it being carcinogenic.
And to your knowledge, Ms. Durst, did Lush ever bake their product?
Not while I was there, and I haven't heard anything from anybody since. So I'm gonna say no.
And in this report, this official report, was there any mention of the possible link to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that was brought up during the meeting?
No. And that kind of struck me as odd because that was a heavily discussed topic in our meeting. So at least I thought that it was pretty important and it should have been included.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Cross-exam.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. You used to be best friends with Charles Doncourt, correct?
Good afternoon. I was about 17 years ago. We were best friends in college and high school, but we've grown far apart, unfortunately.
And it is true that Blake Doncourt, Charles's father, is the owner of Lush Fertilizer.
Yes, that is correct.
You attended Sunday meals with Doncourts, correct?
I did, yes. I miss those so much.
And you took vacations with them to their lake house?
Yes. Yes, some of my favorite. We went to Florida, North Carolina. We went to Texas a couple times. We went to the Bahamas. Oh, I can name so many places we went. It was really amazing.
So you would agree that they were like family to you?
When we were friends in high school and college, but we've drifted apart, unfortunately. Charlie and
So-
I don't talk.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Continue.
No, I'm finished, I think.
Is that a yes, Ms. Durst?
Yes,
And you went to college with Charles, is that correct?
we went to ASU. Go Sun Devils.
Shortly before graduation, you still hadn't found a job.
I was the prospect of a new job. My first job was a little daunting, so I didn't really want to have to think about that. So no,
And you weren't at the top of your class in college.
I still graduated though, but college organic chemistry was a little bit difficult, but I powered through.
But while you were home for spring break, you told Charles about your troubles finding any post-graduation employment.
We had a conversation about that.
Charles told you that Lush Fertilizer was hiring summer interns.
Yes, that is correct.
And he told you that his dad, Blake Doncourt, would pull some strings for you at Lush Fertilizer.
He had some connections, and sometimes you can't always get a job by just looking for one. You have to get a little bit of help. And I knew that it was a hard company to get a job at, so it didn't hurt to at least apply. And I knew it'd be good to put them on my resume for further job opportunities.
So you got the job.
I did, yes.
Even though positions like that are hard to come by for people like you who lack any prior experience.
I was just out of college and I thought, why not apply and see if it's the right fit for me or if I could learn and grow. And thankfully I got the job.
And in your position, you were tasked with researching Drufo, correct?
Yes, I was. I researched one of the chemical compounds called nitrogen phosphorus carbonate, and I found a rat study.
But you never found any studies indicating that Drufo was carcinogenic or hazardous in any way to people, did you?
I hadn't done, no, there wasn't research on that yet. We were still in the testing phase, learning about how Drufo could affect other specimens. So we first focused on rats and then we would end up going there. But personally, I did not.
So it's true that even company-wide studies did not conclude that Drufo has any adverse effects, correct?
Actually, we did do a second study in September, and one of the possible conclusions was a possible link to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I also learned from that September study that Drufo may be a potential carcinogen in humans.
I would like to shift your attention to your work performance at Lush. Toward the end of your employment, you received less than favorable performance reviews, correct?
I believe that I did my job, did it well, but I don't think that some people liked performance and the work that I was putting out after there were some unfavorable conclusions for Lush. And so that kind of backfired on me, unfortunately.
In fact, you received an abysmal performance review in early 2005.
Yes.
Your work was also criticized as being of lower quality as well.
I wouldn't say I was like the top employee, but I definitely did my best, but some people did not agree with that.
And your colleagues began to confront you regarding your contributions to work projects, right?
Yes.
You were accused of just skating along and not pulling your weight.
Falsely accused.
Furthermore, you were accused of being untouchable in the workplace due to your relationship with the Doncourts, correct?
Again, falsely accused.
But accused nonetheless, Ms. Durst?
But falsely.
Is that a yes?
Yes, I was accused falsely.
But you no longer work at Lush, do you?
I am at Terrace Greenery, and it's been one of the best things for my career and for my life. And I just love working there. I love the job that I get to wake up every morning and do.
So before you were even fired, you started looking for another job, correct?
After a couple of months and a while, I realized that Lush was not the right fit for my professional goals, and I wasn't going to get the help and support to grow and learn as much as I had hoped. And so I looked for new jobs. And, I loved fertilizer. I loved the work I was doing at Lush, but the people in the company, it just wasn't for me. And so I found this amazing position at Terrace, and I could not be any happier.
Ms. Darcy, yes or no will suffice. It's true before you left Lush, you had already been hired at Terrace Greenery.
Yes, and I forgot to give my resignation, just so excited for this new opportunity, this new job. I could not wait to get started, and I forgot about what was going on.
And Terrace Greenery is Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor.
Now that I'm working there, they are.
When you applied to Terrace Greenery, you knew that there was nothing but bad blood between Blake Doncourt and the CEO of Terrace.
I talked to Blake, and I wasn't getting the right help that I thought I deserved, and so I had that thought in the back of my mind for just a moment. But then once I cooled down a bit and realized, and I was like, Carson, this is not how you need to be thinking. You need to think about what's best for you and what's best for your career. And so I decided that these reactions toward Lush and toward Blake were not appropriate, looking back 17 years later. But you could say in the moment when I was a little upset, I did have that thought, and I do regret that a little bit.
Thank you, Ms. Durst, but that was not my question. My question was whether or not you were aware that there was nothing but bad blood between Blake Doncourt and the CEO of Terrace at the time during which you applied.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Overruled.
Ms. Durst, is it true that when you applied to Terrace Greenery, you knew that there was nothing but bad blood between Blake Doncourt and the CEO of Terrace? Yes or no will suffice.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence.
Counsel, response to that?
Your Honor, the prejudicial effect of this question does not substantially outweigh the probative value, because I am asking this witness to testify to their bias.
I agree. I think this goes to the credibility of the witness. So the objection is overruled.
Again, Ms. Durst, when you applied to Terrace Greenery, you knew that there was nothing but bad blood between Blake Doncourt and the CEO of Terrace.
Counsel, that thought did cross my mind, but as I said, I realized that was not the appropriate reaction to have. But in the moment, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Despite knowing all of this, you accepted a product development engineer at Terrace.
I knew that I couldn't work for Lush anymore, and so I also knew that I loved working with fertilizer, and so I went to look for a job in the same kind of company work style, and I found this really great job at Terrace that I should take to better my career, and I could not be happy.
And it's true that you left Lush for Terrace because you thought it would anger Blake.
That was a for the moment thought when I was a little upset that he was not helping me get through my troubles with my boss. So.
Is that a yes?
Yes, it is.
And you did so because you thought it would get Blake's goat?
Again, counsel, that thought crossed my mind momentarily, but that was not the main reason at all why I left.
Ms. Durst, is that a yes or a no?
That is a yes, counsel.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. You're excused, Ms. Durst. Plaintiff, will you call your next witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs to the stand.
Mr. Weirs, you've been sworn and you're under oath. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. My name is Feliciana Sayers. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Dakota Weirs. That's spelled Weirs.
Mr. Weirs, what do you do?
Well, the truth is, I currently don't do much, and it's because I can't do much, and that's due to my illness.
What kind of illness?
Well, recently I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer.
What did you do before you were diagnosed with cancer?
Before I had cancer, I truly felt alive. I was an active member of my community. I got good grades. I volunteered at the local homeless shelter. But one of the most important aspects about my life before I had cancer was being able to play the piano.
Why did you enjoy playing the piano so much?
Whenever I played the piano, I could just vibe with the music and let it take me wherever it took me. But one of the most important things about the piano was the connection it built between me and my grandpa, who sadly passed. I mean, whenever I played, it felt like he was right there just listening to me.
Mr. Weers, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your grandfather. Were you any good at playing the piano?
After some time and some lessons on the piano and the general inspiration from my grandpa, I became quite good at it, yeah.
Did anything come from your skills?
Yeah, I got accepted into my dream school, Juilliard. It was a dream come true. My grandpa, he would have been so proud of me.
Did you end up attending Juilliard?
No, I didn't end up going to Juilliard, and that's because around the time I was leaving for college, I started developing some symptoms. I was losing weight constantly, and I was always tired. I had no idea what was wrong with me.
What did you do?
I went from doctor to doctor, just trying to figure out what problem I had, and eventually I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
What kind of symptoms do you experience with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
On top of the weight loss and always being tired, I often get sharp chest pains, and I can't even sit in places for a long amount of time without bruising. Along with that, my lymph nodes are always swollen.
How has this impacted your life?
Well, I can't do anything anymore. I mean, all I do is sleep or lay on my couch and watch TV. I can't even play the simplest of songs on my piano anymore. And worst of all, I mean, my future has been ruined. I'll never be able to get to go to the college that I dreamed of in this condition.
Speaking of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, have you ever been in contact with Drufo?
Yes, I was back when I worked at Havens Landscaping.
What's Havens Landscaping?
Well, it's a landscaping company I worked for back when I was 14 to save up for college, which I realized was pointless now.
And what do you know about Drufo?
Well, one day I was sitting on my couch and watching TV, as I always do. I saw a news story about Drufo and how it's the main chemical in Lush and how it's linked to the cancer that I have.
Have you ever used Lush fertilizer?
I used Lush all the time back when I worked at Havens, yeah.
Were you instructed to follow any safety measures while working with the fertilizer?
The boss always told us to wear a mask and safety gear like a shirt and pants. And I mean, for the first 2 weeks I did, but then I saw that none of the adults did, and I just followed what they did.
Going back to the news story, why was it important?
Well, it linked Drufo, the main ingredient in Lush, to the cancer that I have.
What did you do after you saw the news story?
I immediately called my ex-boss and to warn him about the dangers of Drufo, and I also asked him to send me a picture of the label.
And did he?
Yes.
Mr. Weers, you should have a copy of Exhibit 1 in front of you.
Okay.
What is Exhibit 1?
This is a picture of the label that he sent me.
Is this an accurate copy of the label as you saw it?
Yes, it is.
Has it been altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, we request that Exhibit 1 be entered into evidence for its accuracy and authenticity have been shown.
Response?
No objections, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury?
Permission is granted.
Mr. Weers, what stood out to you about this label?
Well, if you notice on the actual label, you can see there's no actual warning label. I mean, the most it says is an eye irritation, not cancer.
Did anything else on this label stand out to you?
Yeah, when you look under the ingredients and the active ingredients, you can see that it contains Drufo. I did a little more research and realized that Drufo isn't in all Lush fertilizers.
What do you mean Drufo isn't in all Lush fertilizers?
Well, in France, there's Drufo is not an ingredients label, and it's actually banned in the entire European Union.
Why is it banned in the European Union?
I don't know why. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I just have the cancer.
Mr. Weirs, let's talk about Skylar Weirs. Who is Skylar Weirs?
Skylar is my twin.
Did she work at Havens Landscaping with you?
Skylar and I did everything as children, but no, she didn't work at Havens, and that's because she was allergic to grass.
To your knowledge, does Miss Weirs have non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
No,
To your knowledge, does Miss Weirs have any form of cancer?
no, not that I know of.
Are you and your sister still close?
Unfortunately, Sky and I aren't as close as we were anymore. That's because I feel that she resents me because all of our father's money is going to my treatment and not to her.
Finally, Mr. Weirs, why are you here today?
Look, this cancer has truly ruined my life. I look back to when before I had cancer and thought about how I used to tutor kids at NHS, and now I realize how much I took that for granted. I mean, I'll never be able to go back to the life that I had, and I know I won't. And Lush needs to be held accountable for that, for what they did to me.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here, and I'm very sorry for the circumstances that have led you here. I understand you're here because of your non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You believe the sole cause of this is your use of Lush fertilizer, correct?
Yes, Lush is the use of Lush. Yeah, it is the sole cause.
And you came in contact with this product while working as a landscaper for Havens Landscaping, is that correct?
Yeah, I use Lush all the time.
You worked for Havens Landscaping for several years?
4 years.
And during that time, Lush fertilizer wasn't the only fertilizer that you used, was it?
I use other fertilizers, but Lush was one of the ones I use, yes.
You used several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals during your
Yes,
several
I did.
years at Havens, correct?
She was up just a few minutes ago.
As I just said, I use other fertilizers, but Lush was one of the main ones.
But you only sued Lush Fertilizer for failing to ensure your safety?
Well, Lush was the only fertilizer that showed up on a news story saying how it was linked to my cancer. And after seeing this news story and after talking to experts and doing the research, yeah, I decided you need to be held accountable for that.
Just to reemphasize, you sued Lush Fertilizer after watching a story on the news about Drufo, is that right?
No, after I watched the story, me and my father did research. We hired experts who know a lot more about this than me, and then I decided. Yes.
I'd like now to talk about the precautions you chose not to take as a landscape technician. Isn't it true that you were always told to wear long sleeves and gloves while you were wearing fertilizer at your work?
Just anything that protected the skin. The boss did always tell us that, but I mean, look, the adults didn't, and I just followed what they did. I mean, I was only 14 at the time.
Isn't it true you were always told to wear long pants when using fertilizer at your job?
Yeah, I mean, he said pants. Yeah.
And isn't it true that you did not wear a mask when using fertilizer at your job?
Look, this was before COVID. I mean, masks weren't really readily available. And like I said, the adults didn't, and I didn't go out of my way to get masks. Look, if the product would have told me it would have given me cancer, of course I would have worn a mask. I probably wouldn't have worked at the product with the product at all.
Thank you for the explanation, Mr. Weirs, but my question only called for a yes or no answer. Isn't it true you did not wear a mask?
No, I didn't.
Are you aware of any warning labels on the Lush fertilizer product?
No, there's no warning at all. I mean, it only warns of an eye irritation.
Are you aware of any safety precautions on the Lush fertilizer product?
I'm aware of safety recommendations.
Do you still have a copy of Exhibit 1 in front of you, Mr. Weirs?
Yes, I do.
Would you please read out loud in the column?
Objection, Your Honor. Cumulative, this exhibit has already been published to the jury, and Mr. Weirs reading it to the jury is cumulative evidence.
Yeah, I understand the objection, but if Mr. Weirs, if there's something you can point out in there to explain, I'll permit that. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a little bit of audio feedback from somebody who's not presenting. So if everyone who's not presenting could please make sure their microphone is muted, please do that. Ms. Clark.
Mr. Weirs, would you please read out loud in the second column under the label under user safety recommendations?
Yeah. Read to where?
Just the entire paragraph under user safety recommendations.
Objection, Your Honor. This is cumulative, as this exhibit has already been published to the jury, and reading it would be cumulative.
I agree with that objection. Is there something that you can point out in particular rather than just reading the entire thing?
Yes, Your Honor. All of the warnings that it states under the label, specifically the instruction to wear an N95 mask, to wear long sleeves.
Excuse me a minute. I think you're just repeating what's on the warning. The exhibit has been admitted. The jury will be able to read it. So I'm going to sustain the objection at this time and ask counsel to move on.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Weirs, referring to that label and its safety warnings, you only used shorts and a t-shirt when you worked at Havens Landscaping. Is that correct?
Sometimes I did. And as I said, there are no warnings. It just says recommendations.
And you didn't cover your face either, did you?
Masks weren't readily available. The adults didn't, so I didn't. No.
So you were warned about safety procedures around Lush fertilizer, but you chose not to follow them. Is that right?
I wasn't warned about safety features. I was told to wear certain items that adults didn't wear. Look, why would I do something that the other adults didn't do? It just didn't make sense.
Mr. Weirs, were you told about the safety procedures around Lush fertilizer?
I was told safety precautions, safety recommendations, yes.
And did you follow those safety recommendations?
As I stated, no, because it didn't warn of cancer.
And you never sued your employer, Havens.
Sorry, but I need to interrupt. The time for cross-examination has been exhausted.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for interrupting.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is there any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, why didn't you continue to follow the recommendations made by your boss?
Well, there are a number of reasons. One, the adults didn't. Two, I mean, I really would have. I would have followed the safety recommendations. I probably wouldn't have even worked with Lush at all if I had known it would ruin my life.
Was there a warning label on the Lush product?
No, it was not.
Was there any warning of the potential dangers of this product?
I mean, an eye irritation, but not my future being ruined and cancer. No.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the plaintiff have any further witnesses, or does the plaintiff rest their case?
The plaintiff rests.
Thank you. Let's move on to the defense case. Team Dwight, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Mr. Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Mr. Doncourt. Mr. Doncourt, you have been sworn previously and you're under oath. Ms. Clark, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. Please introduce yourself, spelling your last name for the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Blake Doncourt, D-O-N-C-O-U-R-T-T.
Could you please describe your occupation to the jury?
I'm currently the CEO of Lush Fertilizers Incorporated.
Exactly what does Lush Fertilizer do?
Lush Fertilizer is a fertilization company that has the goal of improving the quality and longevity of our clients' lawns and gardens through the use of our flagship product, Lush Fertilizer.
What has led to the success of your company?
I attribute the success of my company to the people working in our research and development team, who after many years have finally started production on a chemical compound known as Drufo.
Is the only goal of your company to improve the quality of lawns and products?
No, that's not our only goal. Our secondary goal is to spread environmental awareness about a rapidly changing climate by donating 10% of our annual profit to nonprofit charities who have the goal of cleaning our oceans, decreasing our nitrogen emissions, and teaching people about how to help our Earth.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Well, I think the question's already been answered.
Your Honor, if this is found not relevant, I would move to strike the answer.
Counsel, response?
Your Honor, this is laying foundation for my witnesses' reason to be testifying in court today.
I overrule the objection, and I decline to strike the testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Doncourt, what steps has Lush Fertilizer taken to improve the environment?
As I had previously stated, Lush Fertilizer donates 10% of our annual profit to nonprofit charities who have the
Objection, Your
goal
Honor.
of
Cumulative.
Overrule.
Mr. Doncourt, would you like me to re-ask the question?
I can answer. So Lush Fertilizer, Lush Fertilizer goes about helping our environment by donating 10% of our annual profit to nonprofit charities who have the goal of decreasing our nitrogen emissions, cleaning our oceans, and educating people about how to deal with our rapidly changing climate.
Have you or Lush Fertilizer won any awards for your humanitarian work?
Well, yes, we've won a number of awards. And in fact, in 2019, we had won the prestigious SEAL Award. And I was personally nominated for the Champions of the Earth Award in 2021.
Congratulations. So, Mr. Doncourt, why are you here in court today?
I am here in court today because myself and my company are being sued by Mr. Weirs under the allegations that our fertilizer caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
You mentioned a chemical compound known as Drufo. Could you please explain what that is?
Drufo is a bonding agent which we put in our fertilizer to increase its shelf life.
Has Drufo been approved by state and federal governments in the United States?
Why, yes, it has. After a number of tests by our R&D and the EPA, Drufo was found to be completely safe under state and federal guidelines. This simply means that we don't have to use warning labels on our products, yet we still do out of an abundance of caution.
I'd like to switch gears now and ask you about a former employee named Carson Durst. Did you know Miss Durst while she worked at Lush?
Yes, I knew Miss Durst. In fact, she was a family friend. And during a lapse of judgment, I had brought her into our company, and she quickly showed promise, rising through the ranks, going from an intern to having a full-time job with our R&D team. And after gaining a plethora of knowledge, she went on her way and eventually began to drop off in quality. And after a number of bad performance reviews, I became aware that she was no longer interested in working with our company, so we had to let her go. Immediately afterwards, she went to our biggest competitor, Terra's Greenery.
What is your response to Ms. Durst's claim that Lush Fertilizer covered up data that Drufo was carcinogenic or perhaps linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, that claim is completely false. If Ms. Durst had ever found any evidence to suggest that, she had neither brought it to me or anyone working within our research and development team. As her job, it would have been her job to bring such information to us, but she didn't if she had found such evidence.
You mentioned previously that you use warning labels. What warning labels were Lush Fertilizer required to put on their product?
As I said, under federal and state guidelines, we're not required to use warning labels, yet we still use the standard model, that being to wear long sleeves, long pants, a respirator, a 95 mask, and to wash their hands and equipment after use.
Why didn't you say on the warning label that failing to wear the protective gear would cause people to get sick or develop cancer?
because not once during the development of Drufo was ever a link found. In fact, our first study conclusively proved that Drufo is not cancerous, or not cancer causing.
If any valid scientific studies or government agency had determined that Drufo was carcinogenic, what would you have done?
We wouldn't have used Drufo in our product to begin with. We're in the business of helping our clients, not hurting them.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-exam.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. My name's Abbott Howe.
Good afternoon.
You are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
That is correct.
And you have built this company to one of the world's largest producers of fertilizer.
Yes, I was with my company ever since it was small, and now we're known nationwide.
And you are extremely proud of your company's success.
Well, I put a lot of work into it. I would be proud of my company.
You have worked night and day to build this company into what it has become.
Yes, any successful CEO would.
But your company is now being threatened by a lawsuit.
We are being sued.
Yeah, and this is a lawsuit that could cost your company lots of money.
Yes, yes.
And this is a lawsuit that could cost your company its reputation.
Yes, that would assume that, no, yes, it could.
This is a lawsuit that could significantly damage the company you have worked so tirelessly to build.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Drufo now. Drufo is a chemical within your company's fertilizer product.
That is correct.
And it is an important chemical.
It is a bonding agent.
It is a chemical.
No, sorry, go ahead.
It is a chemical which has propelled your fertilizer to the top of fertilizer markets around the world.
Not around the world, it's just
in the United States.
Yes.
And it is a chemical which has been alleged to be carcinogenic.
Only alleged. Drufo is not carcinogenic.
It is a chemical which has been specifically linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
It never was.
Mr. Doncourt, there are allegations that your chemical, Drufo, has been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Only allegations. No conclusive evidence has ever been shown to me.
You agree that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a disease that is not genetic?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Mr. Doncourt, you agree that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a disease that is not genetic?
And what is the foundation for that?
Your Honor, Mr. Doncourt, working with this company and being involved in this litigation would have the awareness of knowing if non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a genetic or non-genetic disease.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Doncourt, you are aware that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is not genetic.
Yes.
So this means that to contract the disease, someone needs to be exposed to a harmful environment.
That is correct.
And one of these harmful environments is fertilizer.
Potentially.
Fertilizer is a product that can be carcinogenic.
It could be, yes, but ours isn't.
And because of this, there are measures that fertilizer companies can take to reduce that risk, such as baking the fertilizer.
That would assume that the product is carcinogenic to begin with, but yes.
Mr. Doncourt, in any fertilizer product, baking the fertilizer would eliminate the risk that it is carcinogenic.
That would assume there is a risk to begin with, as ours isn't carcinogenic. It doesn't have to be baked.
But in any fertilizer, it would eliminate the risk of that product being carcinogenic.
Yes.
And baking the fertilizer is a measure that your company did not take.
It wasn't necessary. After the extensive tests done, it was proven not to be it was proven that Drufo is not carcinogenic. Baking the product simply would do nothing to our product.
Because you also deemed that baking the product was too costly.
Yes, it would cost money, but the main reason is that it wasn't necessary.
Mr. Doncourt, please refer to Exhibit 8.
Could I have the, thank you. 1 second. I have Exhibit 8 in front of me.
This is the amortization table that you created.
That is correct. I created this.
Specifically with regards to your finances regarding the baking of Drufo.
Yes, when this was originally created, Drufo was a concept, and I built this table as to determine the potential costs associated with Drufo.
And this is a fair and accurate copy of that table?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff requests that Exhibit 8 be admitted into evidence as its accuracy and authenticity have been shown.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Your Honor, may we publish?
Yes.
Mr. Doncourt, by not baking your product, you had an estimated profit increase of 6% the initial year.
That is correct.
And each additional year thereafter, there was an estimated profit increase of 2%.
That is correct.
You may now take down the exhibit. And this extra money, these extra profits, this was money that your company needed.
Well, we donated 10% of our annual profit to
No.
charities, and the rest was put back into the company.
Mr. Doncourt, you needed this money to pay off the vulture capitalists.
Hmm?
Mr. Doncourt,
Sorry,
is that
could you please repeat that question?
these extra profits were money that your company needed.
Well, we are a for-profit company.
Mr. Doncourt, is it your testimony today that your company did not need these profits?
I'm not saying that we didn't need it. I'm just saying that we're for profit, and pulling in money is the
Mr. Doncourt,
reason.
yes or no?
Yes.
Is it your testimony today that your company did not need these profits?
No, we needed the profits.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, you were asked on cross-exam a number of questions about baking your fertilizer. What does baking the fertilizer do to your product?
Baking our product does absolutely nothing, as it was proved that Drufo is non-carcinogenic. And as a result, baking it would simply do nothing.
And you receive a number of profits from not baking your fertilizer. Where do those profits go?
The profits go back into giving 10% to nonprofit charities, and the rest is put back into our company so that we may continue.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Mr. Doncourt, on redirect, you testified that these profits were put back into the 10% that you donated. Isn't that correct?
Yes, 10% of our profit goes to
Is
charities.
that your testimony today, that you did not need these profits to donate, or that you did not need these profits because of the vulture capitalists?
Your Honor, I believe this question is confusing to the witness.
The witness can indicate what his response is.
Could you please re-ask that? Sorry.
Mr. Doncourt, is it your testimony today that your company did not need these profits to pay the vulture capitalists?
No, we had to repay the money we were given as a startup company.
To the vulture capitalists?
To the people who loaned us money, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Defense, please call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Weirs, you've been sworn, and Mr. Senior, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, please state your name for the jury, spelling your last name.
My name is Skylar Weirs, spelled W-E-I-R-S.
What's your current occupation, Ms. Weirs?
Currently, I'm a freelance investigative journalist for a magazine called The Rationalist.
And what exactly is the Rationalist magazine?
The Rationalist magazine is a science, advocacy, and education magazine published by the Rationalist Society.
And what's the Rationalist Society?
It's a nonprofit organization devoted to resisting the spread of pseudoscience and promoting scientific skepticism in certain fields.
As a freelance journalist, how do you write about the topics that you choose? Or excuse me, how do you choose about the topics that you write?
It could go one of two ways. Either publishers can come to me with a series of topics to write about, or I can go to them with ideas of my own. But at the end of the day, they decide what gets published and what doesn't.
Do you ever let your personal beliefs influence how you write about a certain topic?
No, not at all. I believe it's my job as a professional journalist to completely remove my opinion and give the public a research that is fair and balanced.
And do you specialize in any particular topics while you're writing for The Rationalist?
Well, I write about a multitude of things, but I most frequently write about commercial agriculture and modern agritech.
What research have you done on agricultural technology and modern agritech in particular?
Well, some time ago, my editor came to me with a series of topics to write about, like genetically modified crops, modern agritech, specifically companies specializing in modern agritech, and that's kind of how I got introduced to Drufo. So for the majority of a year, I devoted all of my time researching and studying these topics. I would start by reading various publications issued by modern agritech companies, and then I would track down and read each of the studies cited in those publications to make sure I turned over every last stone. But the majority of the information comes from the USDA and NASDA.
The defense would like to enter Skylar Weirs as an expert in the field of agritech based off of the pretrial ruling of limine. And if I may read from this ruling.
I've read the ruling. I'm familiar with it. Any objection?
Voir dire, Your Honor.
Briefly.
Ms. Weirs, you have no formal education after high school.
No, I do not.
You have no formal training in the field of agritech.
No, I only have my background as a journalist.
Yes. You have no work experience in the field of agritech.
I work for a science education magazine. I'm familiar with the topic.
But you have no work experience within the field of agritech.
No, I do not.
And you have never participated as a part of a scientific study.
I have not, no.
Your Honor, at this time, we object to Ms. Weirs being allowed to provide testimony as an expert in the field of agritech and request you to reconsider your earlier ruling on the matter. Given Ms. Weirs' lack of education and work experience, her mere review of literature does not make her competent and is insufficient to allow her to reach conclusions based on that review. And her opinion will not assist the jury in understanding the evidence or a fact at issue.
Mr. Senior, any response?
Your Honor, the defense believes that we have proven that Skylar Weirs possesses knowledge beyond that of the average juror and has spent a considerable amount of time, over a year, extensively researching modern agritech and agritech practices. So we do still hold that Ms. Weirs may be admitted as an expert in commercial agritech.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection because the court finds that she has specialized knowledge based upon her experience and training and research, and therefore she will be allowed to offer her opinions within the area of agritech.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on, Ms. Weirs, is there anything unique about Lush Fertilizer?
Yeah, Lush Fertilizer uses a truly revolutionary chemical called Drufo.
And what makes Drufo unique?
Well, Drufo has several benefits, one of them being that it's an effective pesticide, and another one being that it's a truly amazing bonding agent, meaning that it can stick to Lush Fertilizer's active ingredients and to the grass and prevents them from being washed away as quickly.
So on that first benefit of Drufo, how does Drufo being an effective pesticide benefit consumers?
It's beneficial because there's no need for Lush Fertilizer to add any other additional pesticides often found in other fertilizers like glyphosate and arsenic, which are categorized as carcinogens.
And what is a carcinogen?
A carcinogen is a substance.
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of this witness's expertise.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, as has been previously stated in this trial, there are many agricultural chemicals which can be carcinogenic. So therefore, within Ms. Weirs' year of researching agritech and its practices, she will have certainly come across the concept of carcinogenicity and can speak to it.
And what is the pending question specifically?
What is a carcinogen?
Objection overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Weirs, what is a carcinogen?
A carcinogen is a substance that, if exposed to it, may cause cancer in some individuals.
So moving on to the second benefit of truth that you stated, how does it being an effective binding agent benefit consumers?
Its ability to the grass and less fertilizer's active ingredients means that significantly less fertilizer needs to be applied and less often. So while other fertilizers need to be applied ballpark 5 to 6 times a year, less fertilizer only needs to be applied 1 to 2 times a year for the same results, which ultimately leads to less nitrogen exposure to the consumer and to the environment.
Why is it important to limit nitrogen exposure?
Nitrogen in some forms can be considered carcinogenic. So in its carcinogenic form, nitrogen has been known to contribute to various types of cancer, methemoglobinemia, adverse reproductive outcomes, especially neural tube defects, thyroid conditions, and diabetes. I could go on, but I would not want to waste your time.
Based off your experience and training, have you concluded whether there is a link between DRUFO and cancer?
In the year that I spent researching and studying DRUFO, I did not find a single study that established a link between DRUFO and cancer. Instead, I only found evidence that DRUFO protects its consumers from exposure to pesticides and overexposure to nitrogen.
So if DRUFO has not been classified as a carcinogen officially, why are there campaigns claiming it is one?
Lush Fertilizers products threatens to upend the entire old guard of agriculture, and the old guard in this case specifically refers to companies who have been in the agricultural field for such a long time and who don't want to promote change. So this old guard is spending billions of dollars to ruin Lush Fertilizers' reputation because at the end of the day, they know that Lush Fertilizers products are abundantly more effective than theirs.
And how do Lush fertilizer products compare to other fertilizer products?
All my research suggests that Lush Fertilizers products is the safest option out there and truly a game changer in terms of agriculture. In my personal opinion, I believe it was more than likely that Dakota was exposed to carcinogenic substances through the use of other fertilizers that do contain pesticides that have been proven to be carcinogenic.
Moving on, do you know the plaintiff in this case, Dakota Weirs?
I do. Dakota is my twin brother.
Mrs. Weirs, what's the status of your relationship with your twin brother?
We haven't always been the closest. That could partially be due to us just having different interests or life just leading us down different paths. But at the end of the day, he's family and I'll always love him despite our differences.
So is your testimony today influenced in any way, shape, or form by your relationship with your brother?
No, not at all. I am here today because I stand by my research and I know that there is not enough sufficient proof to prove that DRUFO causes cancer.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any excuse me, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. In the past, you have challenged the major players in agriculture.
Yes, I have.
You have lost out on many potential job opportunities for holding that opinion.
Yes, this is true.
For having the gall to hold that opinion.
Yes.
And as you testified on direct, you never change your opinion when writing your articles.
When it's something if it's something I believe in, yes.
Ms. Weirs, you are here today testifying in support of Lush Fertilizer?
I am, yes.
You are aware that Lush Fertilizer is a major player in agriculture?
I do believe that, yes.
You have stated your support of Monsanto?
Yes.
Monsanto is a major player in agriculture.
Yes, that is true.
And now your writing is generating income.
It is, yes.
Now let's talk about your research. Initially, you found that there was mass hysteria surrounding DRUFO.
Yes, I did find that.
So you conducted extensive research into the field of agritech.
That is true.
In fact, you doubt anyone has the same overall knowledge of modern agritech that you have.
I did say that, yes.
But you are not aware of any study that establishes a causal link between DRUFO and cancer.
That is true.
Ms. Weirs, you were here today when Ms. Durst testified on the Mattis Bernard study,
Yes, I was here present.
and you heard Ms. Durst testify that C3N09P, an ingredient in Drufo, was linked to causing cancer in rats.
I did hear that, yes.
You never mentioned having read this study.
I did not find a study that, you're correct, I did not find a single study that Drufo is linked to cancer.
That was not my question, Ms. Weirs. My question was, you never mentioned reading this study, and it sounds like your answer is yes.
No, yes, I have not read this study.
You only wrote one article questioning the narrative that there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer.
Yes, that is true.
Let's talk about your opinions on fertilizer in general. No chemical fertilizer will ever truly be safe.
No, you're correct.
In fact, every chemical pesticide contains several well-known carcinogens.
Several of them do, I'm sure.
Is that a yes, Ms. Weirs?
Yeah.
Is that a yes? Drufo contains nitrogen.
Drufo itself does not contain nitrogen, only lush fertilizer.
Drufo bonds the nitrogen in lush fertilizer.
Yes, but Drufo.
And Ms. Weirs, nitrogen is a proven carcinogen.
In certain forms, not necessarily. In lush fertilizer, that hasn't been proven.
Ms. Weirs, that wasn't my question. My question is, nitrogen and nitrates are proven carcinogens.
I believe I answered your question. It is in certain forms.
And pesticides are poison.
Yes, but all fertilizers contain them.
So pesticides are poison.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, I would like to ask, are you being paid for your testimony today by Lush Fertilizer?
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of my cross-examination.
I'm going to sustain the objection. It is.
No further questions then, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the defense have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Dr. Williams, you've been sworn. You may proceed.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Dr. Devin Williams, spelled Williams.
How are you employed, Dr. Williams?
My occupation is I lead the toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer, and I am also the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee.
Could you explain to the jury what toxicology is?
Toxicology is the study of how foreign substances like chemicals and drugs affect the body.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel Exhibit 9. Dr. Williams, do you recognize Exhibit 9?
I do. Exhibit 9 is a, excuse me, let me pull it up real quick. Yes, Exhibit 9 is my CV.
Dr. Williams, is Exhibit 9 a fair and accurate representation of your education, certifications, and professional experience?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, an objection to hearsay.
Counsel, if the exhibit is not admitted, well, let me ask this. If the exhibit is admitted, do you intend to also go through examination about his qualifications?
Yes, we do, Your Honor.
I think that would be cumulative, so I'll give you the option of either admitting the exhibit or going through his qualifications. Your choice. Either one is admissible, but not both.
Your Honor, we will review Dr. Williams' qualifications, so we will not be admitting Exhibit 9 at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So, Dr. Williams, I'd like to briefly walk through your education. Where did you go to school?
I went to school at, Colorado State University, and that is where I received my PhD.
And what did you do during your role as chief medical examiner before returning to school?
My job as chief medical examiner was to analyze human tissue samples collected at autopsy to determine the role of drugs and other toxic chemicals in establishing the cause of death.
And what did you do after obtaining your PhD?
Well, my first teaching job after obtaining my PhD was at CSU as a visiting associate professor of toxicology, and I still teach there, but in 2004 I took a full-time role as an assistant professor of toxicology and pathophysiology at the UC Anschutz, and I worked there until 2010 when I left to take the position at Lush Fertilizer.
What are your responsibilities in that position?
My responsibilities in that position. So I assist the labs and research and development teams to determine the environmental impacts of our products.
I see here that you also hold a position at both the University of New Mexico and at Colorado State University. Can you tell us about this?
Excuse me, could you ask the question one more time?
Of course. You also hold a position at both the University of New Mexico and at Colorado State University. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, in the, I'm sorry, one more time.
You also hold a position at both the University of New Mexico and at Colorado State University. Would you tell us about those?
Yes, at Colorado State University, I am the medical examiner, and at New Mexico, I am I'm an assistant professor.
Are any of the courses that you currently teach relevant to your testimony today?
Yes, I'd say all of them are. All three of my courses focus on the interaction between various environmental factors in the human body, and on my 200 series class on toxicology of environmental and occupational chemicals, focuses heavily on the effects of fertilizer on the environment and the human body.
Dr. Williams, do you currently hold any certifications in Colorado?
Yes, in Colorado, I hold certifications in both clinical and forensic toxicology.
Can you explain the difference between clinical and forensic toxicology?
Well, there's a number of differences, but the biggest one is that in forensic toxicology, we perform tests to determine a cause of death that is typically presented in a legal proceeding, whereas in clinical toxicology, we perform tests to treat and care for an intoxicated or poisoned patient that is alive.
Have you published any peer-reviewed articles in your field?
Yes, the second page of my CV lists my various publications to date, most of which focus on the effects of various toxins in animals.
Your Honor, the defense would like to offer Dr. Williams as an expert in clinical and forensic toxicology.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
He's admitted in clinical and forensic toxicology as an expert witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, how long have you been the lead of Lush Fertilizer Labs and research and development team?
I've been at Lush for 12 years and I've led the toxicology lab for 7.
What are your job responsibilities at Lush?
I assist the labs and research and development teams to determine the environmental impacts of our products.
You also told us that you are currently the chair of Lush's ethics committee. What are your responsibilities in that role?
The purpose of the ethics committee at Lush is to make sure that our business complies with our company's values, and our primary company value is to be environmentally aware.
Dr. Williams, we've heard a lot about DRUFO today. What is DRUFO?
DRUFO, in its simplest terms, binds to the ingredients in the fertilizer to the grass when it's sprayed. As a result, less fertilizer needs to be sprayed and less washes out away into the soil, thereby interrupting the eutrophication process at the very beginning.
What is eutrophication?
Eutrophication is just a buildup of excessive nutrients in bodies of water caused by agricultural runoff.
Why should the jury care about how Lush Fertilizer interrupts the eutrophication process?
Well, every fertilizer, including lush fertilizer, contains nitrogen, but nitrogen in and of itself is not harmful. It's only harmful once the nitrogen gets into the soil and bacteria converts it to nitrates that it becomes harmful to humans. It is those nitrates that are carcinogenic and not the nitrogen itself. I mean, that's the revolutionary thing about lush fertilizer. Drufo binds the nitrogen to the grass. It doesn't get converted to nitrates, and it doesn't get into water sources that might be consumed by humans. And lush fertilizer is safer than any fertilizer out there, and that's because of Drufo.
If lush fertilizer is so safe, then why is it banned in the EU?
Well, the EU has banned any new fertilizers that may contribute more than incidental nitrate accumulation in lab tests, and although Drufo...
The objection?
Speculation, no foundation has been laid for Dr. Williams to be familiar with the ban in the EU, for him to be able to testify about it.
Response?
Your Honor, my witness has been admitted as an expert in the field of clinical and forensic toxicology, which would encompass the ban on any of these products in any country.
Is there any familiarity with this particular study? So as I understand the objection, it's that there's no foundation that the witness is familiar with this study. Is there any evidence that he is?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's hear the evidence, please. Dr. Williams, are you familiar with the study you were asked about?
I am familiar with the study. The study
Okay,
is...
okay, that was my question. You may proceed, counsel. The objection's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
If lush fertilizer is so safe, then why is it banned in the EU?
So, as I was saying, the EU has banned any new fertilizers that may contribute more than incidental nitrate accumulation in lab tests, and although Drufo actually prevents excess nitrate accumulation, it's still a new formula in a product that also contains nitrogen. But we're working on a study we expect will prove that Drufo-based products lead to reduced nitrates in water sources, and if we are right, we plan to submit our findings for reconsideration.
Dr. Williams, have you reached any conclusions regarding whether Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Absolutely. There's no statistically significant link between Drufo and any type of cancer, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
What did you rely on in reaching this conclusion?
In addition to my knowledge, training, and experience, all of the data I have reviewed shows no elevated risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from exposure to Drufo as compared to other fertilizers.
You have mentioned the Dr. Rogers study was not peer-reviewed. What does that mean? Oh, I apologize. Yeah. Is that correct? What does that mean?
Re-ask the question.
You mentioned the Dr. Rogers study was not peer-reviewed. What does that mean?
So Dr. Rogers' study was never peer-reviewed, and peer review is the process in many scientific findings where people have to re-review an author's work, and it is gone to the scrutiny of other experts in the same field, and it is designed to assess the validity and quality of articles for publication. Peer review is essential to maintaining the integrity of science by filtering out invalid or poor quality articles.
So do you find Dr. Rogers' research to be unreliable?
Absolutely. His study was never peer reviewed, and yeah, it was never peer reviewed, so I find it unreliable.
Dr. Williams, are you being paid for your testimony today?
I'm not being paid by the hour, and my paycheck from Lush Fertilizer will be the same this month as it was last month. I'm here today because I believe that Lush Fertilizer is the safest product on the market and has truly revolutionized the industry.
Returning to Mr. Weirs, do you have any opinion as to whether Drufo caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
I am confident to a reasonable degree of scientific probability that Mr. Ware's cancer was not caused by exposure to Drufo.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Newman, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, on direct examination, you said that you were the medical examiner for CSU. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
So it's your testimony here today that you are you were the medical examiner for CSU?
Yes.
Dr. Williams, you prepared a statement for today's case?
Yes, I do have a statement.
You signed the statement
I signed the statement, yes,
affirming that it was true,
in its entirety, yes.
accurate,
Accurate, yes,
and it held all of the relevant information that you knew of. Isn't that right?
yes,
And you knew you had an obligation to change that statement if any new information arose.
if any new information arose, that statement would be changed, but none that has popped up, or none that has reached me has been relevant to change my statement.
And nowhere in your statement do you say that you are the chief medical examiner for CSU. Isn't that right?
That is true.
Dr. Williams, you do, however, lead the toxicology labs. That is correct, right?
That is true.
So it was your job to test the safety of the products you came across, such as Drufo.
Drufo is one of the products, yes, yeah.
Now in your statement, you attempt to discredit Dr. Rogers' study. Isn't that right?
I didn't attempt. I believe I fully was able to, in my statement, prove that Dr. Rogers' study was inconclusive.
Something being inconclusive is not the same as discrediting Dr. Williams. Isn't that right?
It still shows.
However,
I'm sorry. Yes.
However, you do attempt to discredit Dr. Rogers' study by talking about the perceived confirmation bias that occurred. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to talk about your own examination of Drufo now. You looked at data that compared a population of people who used Drufo to a population of people who used other fertilizers. Isn't that right?
Could you ask that question one more time? I apologize.
Yes. You looked at data that compared a population of people that used Drufo to a population of people who used other fertilizers. Isn't that right?
That is true.
Yes, and all that data was consistent with users of Drufo not having an elevated risk of developing cancer. Isn't that right?
There was no risk ever found that Drufo was causing cancer. Yes.
There was no elevated risk.
No elevated risk.
Yes.
Yes.
And Dr. Williams, we already established you prepared a statement for today's case. And you made sure that this statement included all of the relevant information that you would think this trial needed.
Yes.
And yet nowhere in this statement do you actually include the specifics of the study you took data from. Isn't that correct?
The specifics of the study aren't present, but that is still irrelevant, I would say, because the study was still conducted.
Dr. Williams, that wasn't my question. My question was that you didn't include any of the specifics of this study in your statement.
The specifics are not in the study, no.
The specifics are not in your statement. So
Not in
therefore, we will never know when the study was conducted.
The study was, yes.
We will never, the jury will never know who conducted this study.
The study was conducted by Lush Fertilizer.
Is it your testimony here today that this study was conducted by Lush Fertilizer?
No.
So we don't know who conducted this study, when it was conducted. We don't even know who specifically was tested in this study. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Simply that the data you found came to a conclusion that you agreed with.
That is true.
Now you believe that Drufo did not cause the cancer in today's case because it is far too statistically unlikely. Isn't that right?
It was statistically unlikely that Drufo did cause Mr. Weir's case of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Yes.
That's right. You claim this because there was no statistically significant increase in the development of cancer as compared to the population of other users.
As compared to that general population, yes.
Yet nowhere in your statement do you include your error rate for what is and is not statistically significant. Isn't that right?
The error rate is not present in my statement.
No. Now, an error rate is something that is the probability of coming to a false inference on the sample data. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And therefore, you not including your error rate in your statement means the jury will never know the probability of you coming to a false inference after your review of the data. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So you just state that it doesn't cause cancer.
Well, with my field in clinical toxicology, I would say that no, it doesn't cause cancer.
No. Which you believe is fortunate for Lush, for its stockholders, and for the planet. Isn't that right?
Could you repeat that question?
When stating your conclusions that Lush did not cause the cancer, and that Drufo did not cause the cancer in today's case, you state that it is fortunate for Lush, for its stockholders, and for the planet, in that order. Isn't that right?
It would be beneficial that Drufo does not cause cancer because then
Dr. Williams, I understand you would like to explain your answer and you will have ample time to do so on redirect. However, my question asked for simply yes or no.
Thank you. No.
So no, you did not state that it is fortunate for Lush, its stockholders, and the planet that Drufo did not cause the cancer in today's case?
No, I did state that.
In fact, you're sad that the jury will not be able to look at the benefits of the planet, what Lush has marketed as a revolutionary ingredient.
It would be upsetting for the jury to not be aware of what benefits Drufo provides to its customers.
Right, upsetting to you. And simply that they will have to look at whether it causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma in a vacuum.
That is the verdict they have to reach.
They would have to look at the effects of this chemical on people, which was your job. Isn't that right?
That is true.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the defense rest its case?
Your Honor, the defense rests.
So next will be closing arguments. Let's take about 30 seconds for everybody to kind of get organized and settled. And then after about 30 seconds, we'll proceed with closing arguments by the plaintiff. Okay, is everyone ready to proceed with closings?
The plaintiff is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll start with the plaintiff. Plaintiff, you get, for closing argument, you get 5 minutes. You can reserve some for rebuttal if you would like. Would you like to
Yes.
reserve any time for rebuttal?
At this time, I would like to request any time I have left remaining be used for rebuttal.
Okay, and for the defense, you get 5 minutes for your closing, but you don't get a chance to do rebuttal. So we will proceed with plaintiff's closing argument. You may proceed.
DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup. Dakota Weirs is shuffling towards the piano. He's hoping for the music of his childhood to break his everyday, perpetual silence. He desperately reaches for the keys, but his hands, they don't leave his side. The silence stretches on while he is trapped in this shell of a body, gutted with the knowledge that his life's joy is gone. Members of the jury, yet again, we are faced with another company that is completely disinterested in customer safety, and they're trying to hide behind environmentalist gimmicks. But as we saw here today, they have failed. Our burden, prove Lush was negligent and that their negligence damaged Dakota Weirs, someone they should have reasonably expected to use their product. We have met our burden. Let's talk about how. At the beginning of this trial, Ms. Sayers asked you to remember these 3 questions. 1, how safe is Drupal? Really? Well, if the defendant had his way, we wouldn't know, because every attempt to accurately examine the safety of Drufo was ignored and suppressed. Dr. Williams cannot even cite any study Lush actually did on the safety of Drufo. Luckily, in the midst of this blatant attempt to hide the truth, Dr. Rogers conducted his own study, which proved being exposed to Drufo once is just like being exposed to arsenic 10 times. Members of the jury, Drufo was designed to kill. Its original intention may have been for pests or weeds, but a killer is a killer, nonetheless. 2, should we hold a 14-year-old responsible for his own protection? No one around him wore a mask. Why would he? He can't even choose his own bedtime. To expect a 14-year-old to always act in their best interest when everyone around them is doing the exact opposite is preposterous. And finally, 3, did Lush do enough? Well, Skylar Weirs told you about the mass hysteria surrounding the use of Drufo. And what was Lush's response? Nothing. They didn't fake, retest, recall, or even mention this perceived danger. None of this information was included in any safety ratings, and customer safety was certainly not deemed important enough to warrant any warning labels. DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup, Lush fertilizer, Drufo. Time and time again, the defendant has proved they are on this list, and they should be held responsible for the collateral damage their negligence has caused. Now, Dakota Weirs didn't lose income due to the defendant's negligence. No, he just lost the quality of his life. It is up to you to put a value on that loss, on his pain. In 2014, 4 years before Lush Fertilizer started exposing Dakota Weirs to their carcinogenic product, they made almost $2 million. Award the money Lush made when they chose to neglect their customers. Give it to the person they sacrificed. Find the defendant liable and award Dakota Weirs at least $8 million. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask the timekeepers how much time is left for rebuttal? 56 seconds for rebuttal if you choose to use it. Ready for closing argument for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Dakota Weirs played a game of Russian roulette. He took a risk with his life, his career, his passion. Dakota Weirs risked it all, and for what? The truth, ladies and gentlemen, as you've seen here today, is that Lush Fertilizer is safer and more environmentally friendly than any of its competitors. The truth is that Lush Fertilizer has always been committed to the safety of its consumers. And the truth is that the plaintiff gambled with his life when he disregarded countless warnings to wear protective clothing and face coverings during his time as a landscape technician. When the plaintiff developed an illness as a result of exposure to one of the many chemicals he worked with, he chose to single out only one, my client, Lush Fertilizer. Members of the jury, you have before you a set of jury instructions that serves to guide your decisions during deliberation. I'd like to direct your attention to instruction number 2. This instruction states that for the plaintiff to prevail on his negligence claim, he must prove all 4 of these elements by a preponderance of the evidence. This means the plaintiff must prove that each one is more likely true than not. The plaintiff has failed to meet this burden in 2 ways. First, the plaintiff has not proven that Lush fertilizer caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Every witness in this case has testified that competing fertilizers contain known carcinogens. The plaintiff himself acknowledges that during his 4 years working as a landscape technician, he used several other fertilizers in addition to Lush's. The plaintiff has offered no evidence that it was Drufo in particular, rather than any of those other fertilizers, that caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Given the number of other products he used and the years over which he used them, there is simply no way of knowing which, if any, of these products caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The plaintiff has therefore failed to prove the causation element of his negligence claim, which by itself allows you to find Lush fertilizer not liable. Second, even if the plaintiff had proven that it was in fact Drufo that caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, his negligence claim still does not hold any ground because he has not shown that Lush fertilizer failed to exercise a reasonable care in its manufacturing and distribution of Drufo. You heard from 3 witnesses from the defense, and each one told you the same thing. There was not and never has been any valid scientific evidence that Drufo is carcinogenic. To start, you heard from Blake Doncourt, Lush's CEO. He talked to you about the extensive testing his company's products undergo before they are introduced to the market. Mr. Doncourt told you that he had seen no valid scientific evidence that Drufo was carcinogenic, and that if he ever had seen any such evidence, he never would have allowed Drufo to enter the market. Then you heard from Skylar Weirs, an independent journalist with the Rationalist magazine. She has never been paid by Lush Fertilizer, and she was not compensated by Lush Fertilizer to testify today. Ms. Weirs studied and wrote extensively on Lush Fertilizer as an investigative journalist and found no sort of causal link between Lush Fertilizer and Drufo or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other type of cancer. Finally, you heard from Dr. Devin Williams, who holds a PhD in pharmacology and toxicology and has led Lush Fertilizer's research and development team for the last 7 years. Dr. Williams and his team concluded that Drufo is not only non-carcinogenic, but also that it significantly reduces environmental risks and human health hazards because it does not need to be used nearly as often as competing fertilizers. In fact, the only witnesses who ever suggested that Drufo is carcinogenic have a clear bias to testify against my client. The plaintiff's paid expert, Dr. Casey Rogers, testified that he stands to rack up a significant amount of money testifying in Drufo cases nationwide. In all of his conviction, however, the research Rogers swears by rests on a shaky foundation. It has not even been peer-reviewed, much less repeated, and it certainly has not been accepted by the scientific community. As for Carson Durst, she walked into this courtroom in search of something far more sinister. Ms. Durst has been seeking a way to retaliate at Blake Doncourt ever since she was fired from Lush Fertilizer. Ms. Durst claims to have been privy to a cover-up, but has no evidence to support her claim. Most importantly, she admits that neither she nor Lush Fertilizer ever found any concrete evidence that Drufo is carcinogenic to humans. As a result, the plaintiff has not met his burden of showing that Lush Fertilizer failed to exercise reasonable care. But ladies and gentlemen, even if you believe the plaintiff has met his burden, you must also consider whether the plaintiff bears any responsibility for his injuries. Instruction number 9 requires you to reduce the plaintiff's damages by whatever responsibility they bear for their injuries, up to 100%. How do we know the plaintiff bears responsibility? We can point to Exhibit 1. The Lush Fertilizer label reads, "As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended." The plaintiff himself told you that he did not use Lush Fertilizer as intended. He used it without goggles, without a mask, and without long sleeves and pants. He directly disobeyed the warnings by both his employer and the guidelines provided by the manufacturer. Given this, the defense requests that you find Lush Fertilizer not liable for negligence, or alternatively, to find the plaintiff comparatively at fault for his injuries. Do not reward Mr. Weirs for his game of Russian roulette. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the plaintiff have any rebuttal closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you have 56 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Lush Fertilizer knew their product was dangerous, and they knew they had a bullet in the chamber. And they played Russian roulette with their customers' lives. Blake Doncourt took on a responsibility when choosing to create products that were intended to kill. And yet at every opportunity, they chose marketability, profits, over the true and legitimate safety of their customers. And Dakota Weirs will be paying the price for their decision for the rest of his life. Award the money Lush made when they actively chose to endanger their customers, and give it to the person they sacrificed. Find the defendant liable and award Dakota Weirs at least $8 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the trial. I'd like to thank all counsel for their very professional and concise presentations. The case will now be submitted to the jury for deliberation. And Ms. Ham, the scoring judges now complete their score sheets. Is that correct?
That is correct. I will verify on the back end once I have all 3 of their score sheets, and then we can move on.
And then once we get all the score sheets, each of the members of the scoring panel get a very brief minute or 2 to give some feedback. Is that correct? So let me say again that I'd like to thank you all for your fine presentations. This is not unlike real life where you've done it and now you're waiting for the deliberations. So it's a true to life experience here.
Judge, we are good to go. We have collected all scoring sheets.
Okay, great. So as I understand, each scoring panelist gets to give a couple minutes of feedback. Is that correct?
That is correct. And then you can do so yourself.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. Hunter, why don't we begin with you?
Sure. Thank you all for your work and for what it took to get here. I'm Charlene Hunter. I'm an attorney. I do mostly family law, landlord tenant sort of things, but I'm also a longtime scoring panelist and newly a coach of a team at Denver Waldorf High School. We've just started this year. We weren't ready to compete this year, but I'm going to show my class your work. So thank you for providing an excellent example that I can show my students who are just getting started on this journey. At this level, you're all, you know your stuff, you're doing very well. You know, great presentations. It's a hard format being on video versus being in person. There's some advantages, but a lot of disadvantages, and I recognize that. And I will say that, the scoring is always is tricky. I have to say to you, Mr. Bertram, that I had to score you down because I could see that you were reading from your document. I mean, it was on video. So you just need to know that's not allowed in the rules. You're a witness, and you can't have documents on the stand with you. So that wouldn't have happened had we been live. I realize that you've got vigorous cross-examination, and that was partly a result of how Judge Pratt ruled in regards to the CD, but you just want to take care with that for your ongoing cases. So thank you all, and thank you for your excellent technology and use of the people who supported you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but you show up as TLS. Are you one of the scoring panelists?
No, sir.
Okay.
Harry is your other one, and then Tanya.
Okay, Mr. Klein.
Hi, everyone. Harry Klein. I started my career as a litigator for 10 years and then went into private practice with Cisco Systems, if you know them, doing in-house corporate legal work. And currently, I'm semi-retired and I do part-time work, helping Cisco put together contracts and deals with customers. But I do remember what litigation is like, and I got to say, you guys are fantastic. I thought almost everyone did just a phenomenal job. It makes me remember back when I did moot court, and I'm kind of ashamed at how I must have appeared. But I do want to hit a couple of things in particular that I thought were phenomenal, and I want you to focus on, because as you go to the next rounds, think about how effective some of these things were. Feliciana, you had a great opening and you set the stage for your theory of the case. That 1, 2, 3 linking Drufo to DDT, Agent Orange, and Roundup, I thought was incredibly effective. It painted a picture of something really, really bad and poisonous. And you came back to it at the end. And so did Moira in the closing, brought back that same theory. And I thought that's a really effective way to get that out there. Moira, you were so poised, methodical. Your direct was conversational. It showed that you were listening. Your cross-examining was logical and reasonable, and you didn't let the witnesses stray. I thought that was really well done. Abbott, I thought you did really good at your signposting. You were signaling where you were going to go, and your transitions were very, very strong. And your cross-examination, this is something that not everybody really thinks about. But if you put too much into a question when you're cross-examining a witness, you leave a lot of wiggle room to kind of avoid what the question is. But you did a great job of short, to the point questions that if you answered in disagreement, it just was going to sound irrational. So you were really effective with that. And the witnesses on the plaintiff's side, I thought, were all really, really well versed in the case, knowledgeable, believable, sympathetic. Thought you guys did great. On the other side, and I'll try to be very quick here, Evelyn, I thought your opening was really good. Your cross, I love the fact that you started with an expression of sympathy for a very sympathetic witness, and I thought that you needed to do that. And I love the phrase, let's talk about the precautions you chose not to take. That's a really, really strong way to get right in front of everyone the fact that there were things that could have been done and were not done. Andrew, your direct had great pacing and very conversational. Jasmine, I thought your cross was really good in the sense that you held to the yes, no. You had a witness who was just adding on a lot of things. The only advice I would say is you can get the judge to instruct the witness to answer the question in a yes or no fashion. And I think that's something that you could have done. I love the fact that on direct, you asked the question, why should the jury care? That's a real good way of connecting a witness with the jury, and that's really important. Your closing was very passionate, thorough, emphatic. The only thing I would say is just be a little careful. You were going kind of fast. I would slow down a little bit. The witnesses, I thought, once again, were really good. I did notice a little bit of the reading, or it seemed like it was a little less familiarity with things that were in your statements, and you got caught on that a few times by good cross examinations. So that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen.
Hi, thank you. Well done today, guys. My name is Tanya Cohen, and I'm the Director of Litigation Support for the University of Colorado. I've been in the litigation field for, this is my 23rd year now. I also participated in mock trial in junior and high school, so I've been in your shoes before. And I've also participated in a lot of moot court at various law firms. So I just want to echo what my colleagues on the panel have said. I think that they really hit on most of the points here today. So I'll be more general in my comments. I would like to commend you on your professionalism. I thought both teams did really well there today. I also know that it can be a little difficult in this remote environment to project and emote and inflict. And I think that the attorneys and witnesses did a really good job with that. Attorneys, you were definitely zealous advocates today. So kudos for you. You were doing a really good job for your clients. And witnesses, you did a really good job with your statements and knowing your stuff. So just good jobs all around. And congratulations for making it this far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just very brief comments. I appreciate how concise and to the point everybody was. And I think that we lawyers could learn from that, because we're often not that concise and to the point, and we could do a better job. So you're good examples of that. Also, I really appreciate the civility and the professionalism. And that's something that is extremely important in doing litigation and being in court. Contrary to TV and the movies, civility and professionalism are paramount. So thank you all very much. Ms. Ham, what next?
You are dismissed. Next round starts at 4 o'clock.
Thank you all.
Good luck to
Before
everyone.
plaintiff leaves, could I
Good
just
luck.
say that you guys were super fun to compete against? Thank you so much for that competition. That was great.
Thank you.
Good luck to you all.
Good luck
Good
to
luck
you
to you
all as you
guys.
go forward. Bye-bye.
Good luck.